Did you realize that the Chicken Run movie is filled with amazing little details? One of them is the truck sign of the restaurant franchise that Mrs. Tweety and Dr. Fry were going to refill with nuggets. If you look closely, you'll notice it says pig out, which also means eating too much. That's exactly what the villains intended to do with as many chickens as possible. The problem is, if it depends on Ginger, Rocky, Molly, and company, it will never happen, as long as they are not nuggets or chicken pies.
Steal the truck, then we're home free.
This is just the first of the 20 secrets you didn't notice in Chicken Run 2. Stick with us until the end to discover all the sensational secrets. Right at the beginning of the movie, we see Ginger and Rocky looking at various newspaper clippings. In one of them, the headline says "Gravy Plot Thickens," a clear reference to the news at the chicken farm where the incident occurred. And indeed, things thickened for Mrs. Tweety as everything exploded and went airborne. Speaking of explosions, on another newspaper pinned to Ginger and Rocky's board, we see another British-style pun, talking about an egg-splosion, another wordplay associated with the movie's theme and its protagonists, the group of runaway chickens led by Ginger. Another interesting thing is the confirmation, amidst the newspapers, that the owner of the circus where Rocky was the flying rooster is Colonel Daniel Spoon, as in the first film credits, he was called Circus Man. Maybe this is not without reason. Who knows, maybe he appears in the third film as one of the main villains. Have you thought about that? Another detail is when Molly was born, or rather hatched, we can see that she has some interesting features. For example, we all know that Ginger and Rocky are Molly's parents. Still, what many people didn't notice is that Molly has blue eyes, while Rocky has brown eyes and Ginger has green eyes. Probably, this differentiation was intentional to highlight the difference between Ginger and her daughter, as they would interact a lot throughout the film, and they are very similar, both inside and out.
She's perfect. Welcome to the world. Molly.
Another interesting thing about Molly that few people noticed is her crest. She was born with 2 purple crests on her little head, but as she grew, when she is a bit bigger, we can see that 2 of her 3 crests start to turn red. And when we see her even larger, in the rebellious teenage phase, escaping to Funland Farms, we can notice that now both crests are completely red, and one remains purple. The attention to detail in Molly's growth and transition phases by the studio is simply amazing, don't you agree? Another super cool detail that only sharp eyes like ours noticed was that when Molly was a mischievous little baby and she topples her stroller, we see a small mouse-shaped doll lying on the ground. Probably, it was a gift from her 2 uncles by consideration, Nick and Fetcher. Speaking of consideration, consider subscribing to our channel. Believe me, it's better than eating a bucket full of nuggets. This way, you can watch the best videos about movies, series, and cartoons by simply clicking the subscribe button. This next topic is more of a similarity than a detail, but tell me if you don't agree. When Ginger and Rocky create a prison, a fence for Molly to stay safe, we see that next to it there's a ball. We can see that it has some stars around it. Many people who noticed this ball found it very similar to Pixar's ball that appears in all the company's films. And you? Did you find them similar or completely different? Comment below for us to know. It's also interesting to note that some of the same toys that were with Molly in the playpen when she was a little baby are still stored on her family's porch, like the blue dye and the letter cubes that we see again in another scene and that were with her when she begins to dig to escape. I think it's super cool to keep old toys to remember the past. Someone at the studio thought the same thing. This next one is definitely a quite sinister secret. When Ginger dreams about the Funland Farms van, we can notice that the vehicle's plate reads the word fun, followed by the number 001. Also, she sees the silhouette of Mrs. Tweety holding an axe, just like she did in the first film. And the most interesting thing is that both things prove to be true. As we all saw in the trailers, Mrs. Tweety appears again as the main villain. And when Ginger and Rocky try to rescue Molly for the first time, still in the van, we can see that the vehicle's plate is exactly Fun 001. But the detail is that Ginger had never seen that plate until that moment. Is this avian luck or chicken premonition?
Your daughter is going to be dangerous.
It really seems that Mrs. Tweety learned from past mistakes and warnings from her ex-husband. When he used to tell her that the chickens were up to something, she was extremely dismissive. But when it proved that the chickens indeed had escape plans, it was too late. Due to the incident and knowing the intelligence of the escaped chickens, in her new vehicle, Mrs. Tweedy conducts preventative checks on entering vehicles, using detectors to check the underside of vans where small chickens could hide. When Ginger and the other chickens initiate the invasion plan at Funland Farms, we see one of the guards reading a book that seems to be self-help for people working in the sector. The cover features a security guard simply sucking his thumb. In the same security guard scene, we can notice that his mug bears the Funland Farms symbol, which is the outline of a chicken sitting on its own bucket with thumbs up. I mean feathers, since chickens don't have thumbs. We see exactly the same logo when the company gate closes after the van enters. And it's the image of the chicken that is stamped on the vans transporting chickens to the company. If you watched or are going to watch Chicken Run 2, comment below, #Nugget, so we know who the fans of these runaway chickens are, just like us. In the same security guard scene, we can see another curious detail. There are 2 cameras watching Sector 7. What we can say is an error, as there are 16 sectors, as we can see from the number of buttons and their numbering on the control panel. And 16 is exactly the number of screens that appear for the guard, indicating that each screen should monitor each of the sectors. Still, there are 2 cameras watching the same sector, the 7th. What does that mean? One of the sectors is unmonitored. Did the chickens know about this? I don't think so. But all of this has a reason, as it was exactly in Sector 7 that Mac, Babs, and Bunty accidentally met Molly and Ginger. And it was also in Sector 7 that the chickens and the 2 rats were trapped inside the popcorn silo that would later explode with popcorn. It seems like the production team was already dropping hints about things that would happen later in the movie. Well played! One of the most thrilling scenes in the movie is undoubtedly the scene where Rocky relives his flying rooster moments with the help of Nick and Fetcher to save Ginger. For this, they cause a short circuit and the ventilation throws Rocky. Many of us may not know, but scenes involving ventilation systems were widely used in action films of the 80s, as was the case with Lock Up, a film starring Sylvester Stallone. I think there's a fan of old action movies in the production team. For fans of Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, the name of Mrs. Tweedy's new husband must have sounded a bit familiar. The name of the genius behind the collars that keep the chickens in a constant state of joy is Dr. Fry. The name closely resembles 2 characters from Futurama, another series created by Matt Groening. Fry, the protagonist of the series, and his distant relative Dr. Farnsworth, who is kind of a mad scientist, just like Dr. Fry in Chicken Run 2. Speaking of Dr. Fry, the facilities he and his fortune built for Funland Farms from the inside resemble the underground layers of cinema's great villains, such as Dr. No, referencing old spy films starring the cinema's most famous agent, James Bond. This is a home homage since both 007 and Aardman Studios are of British origin. Now let's talk about a small continuity error in the film that occurs when the group of chickens, along with Nick and Fetcher, is trapped in the cornfield silo. At the moment when Molly talks to her mother, we can see Ginger's collar thrown to the side. When they fall in an attempt to escape the place, we see the bags and utensils of the chickens, but not the collar. But when Rocky is preparing to jump into the silo, we can see that it mysteriously appears again. Nothing that takes away the brilliance of this film, which is simply amazing. And to conclude, when Ginger and her companions dive into the water to safely enter Funland Farms, right above them we see explosive duck number 9. The same duck that also appears at the end of the film, helping to blow up Mrs. Tweedy, to our delight. Seeing that woman getting into trouble is so satisfying. These were the 20 amazing secrets we brought exclusively to reveal to you. Chicken Run is one of the most creative movies I've ever watched, without a doubt. We're leaving 2 options on your screen right now for you to continue having fun. Just choose one of them and enjoy the video.